guys, so today I'm going to be doing my labor and delivery story. So going back to when I got pregnant, well actually I got pregnant through fertility. I'll be doing a separate fertility story in a later video, but I got pregnant last August, so August of 2019. And I had a really easy pregnancy, no morning sickness, no gestational diabetes. Everything was pretty good, except for when I became pregnant, they took my first initial blood work and they noticed that I had low platelets, which platelets are the clotting factor in your blood. So they checked on that throughout my pregnancy. They went further down as my pregnancy progressed. So right before I gave birth, my platelets were pretty low. At, I want to say about 38 weeks, I started getting symptoms of preeclampsia, which is a medical condition. I can actually insert the definition of preeclampsia here for you guys. Some symptoms of the preeclampsia that I had were I started getting swelling in my feet. I started getting headaches occasionally. And I gained 5 pounds in the matter of 5 days, which the rapid weight gain is a big sign of the preeclampsia. So at I was like 38. I was a little over 38 weeks. They decided to do my blood work and see if I did in fact have preeclampsia. And I did. I was just on the border. I was like this is the preeclampsia. This is preeclampsia. And I was like right there. So I went in at 38 weeks and 6 days because I had a headache. And I called my OB that morning and I said I had a headache. And she said, why don't you come in and we'll check your blood pressure. Another sign of preeclampsia is elevated blood pressure. So I went in and they noticed that my blood pressure was elevated. So she comes into the room and she says, you know what, you're 38 weeks and 6 days. We're just gonna send you to the hospital. We'll have them monitor your blood pressure, but they might just induce you there. So I was like, oh my gosh. So I left my OB's office. I ran home. I got all my hospital bags. I grabbed my husband and off to the hospital we went. When I got to the hospital, my blood pressure started to stabilize and they did some more blood work. And again, my platelets were really low, but they decided to just induce right then and there because I was just 1 day away from 39 weeks. And when you have preeclampsia, it's better to just get the baby out. The only thing you can do for preeclampsia is get the baby out and that solves the problem. So they decided to induce me right then and there. I was super nervous because my entire pregnancy, I was super nervous about labor. I've never been one that tolerates pain well. I hate getting my blood drawn. I hate vaccines. I hate it all. So super nervous about labor, but you know, it was go time. There's nothing I could do at that point. She said, but before we admit you, you have to do the COVID test. Because at the time the pandemic was going on. Well, it's still going on as I film this video. So she wheeled me into the parking lot of the hospital and they did the COVID test, which honestly I thought was awful. It goes up both nostrils really far and then they twist the swab. I was like coughing and gagging right in the nurse's face, but she had like a full face shield on and everything. But so then they took me back into my triage room until the results came back. They were negative, so they admitted me and then took me into a labor and delivery room. The anesthesiologist came down and talked to me about the epidural. He said that my platelets were a little lower than they would like to see for the epidural. However, as long as I knew the risks, so I said, you know what, despite the risks, I want the epidural. He said, before your platelets get any lower, let's place the epidural catheter in your back, but we won't turn on any medication until you're absolutely ready for the epidural. Because at that point, I wasn't in labor yet. I had not started any labor induction medication. So he placed the epidural, which I was so terrified of the epidural my entire pregnancy. I was more scared of the epidural than labor itself for the most part. And I told the anesthesiologist, I was like, I'm terrified. And he's like, he looked at my tattoos and he's like, if you can get a tattoo, you can do this. So they have your husband leave the room, and I like almost cried when he was leaving. But they have you sit at the edge of the bed and like lean over, and I held my nurse's hand and he did the epidural, and honestly, it was nothing. I didn't even feel it at all. I don't know if I just had a great anesthesiologist, but I didn't even feel the catheter. I didn't feel the needle. They numb you with a needle first, and then they put the catheter in, and I didn't feel any of it, which was great. So then they started me on Pitocin. which is a labor-inducing drug. Also, I should add that at this point, it was about 9 o'clock at night. We had gotten to the hospital about 5 p.m. and it took a couple hours to get the COVID test and get admitted. And by this point, after I got the epidural and started the Pitocin, it was about 9 p.m. So then I remember me and my husband just relaxing, watching TV. I believe I fell asleep for a little bit. It was super hard for me to sleep because they have monitors on your belly monitoring your contractions and the baby's heart rate. I had the blood pressure cuff that was constantly going off. I had my IV in my hand. So I had all these wires, and I also had the epidural in my back. I had everything. So it was super hard for me to sleep. I remember being so uncomfortable in that bed with all the wires that I was constantly turning and moving, and the nurse was constantly coming in and checking on me, and I just kept saying I'm so uncomfortable, not from like the contractions or anything, but just from laying in this uncomfortable bed with all these monitors. And then around 5 a.m., I remember just waking up and I was in pain out of nowhere. I pretty much wasn't in pain at any point up until 5 a.m. Then it just hit me out of nowhere and my contractions were back to back. I wasn't having any sort of break at all in between them. I couldn't even breathe. That's how painful they were, and I wasn't getting a break in between, so it was really rough. And then my doctor comes in, looks at the monitor, and she's like, you are not getting any break in between these contractions. We need to turn the Pitocin down. So then she checked me, and I was still only about 2 centimeters dilated, which was really discouraging, but I was in so much pain. She asked me, do you want the epidural? And I was like, yes. So they turned it on, and it feels like, it's such a weird feeling. It feels like liquid just going through your body. Like I could feel it going through my body. So I got the epidural, and then I felt so much better. The epidural is magic, you guys. I loved it. And then at that point, I still really wasn't able to sleep because like I said, I was uncomfortable, but I couldn't feel contractions anymore. It just felt like pressure. And I remember every time I would get a contraction, I would tell my husband, I feel pressure, but no pain. It was that part. I would say that the labor part itself was super easy. And then I think they checked me again at 10 a.m. and I was about, I'm not 100% sure. I want to say I was about a 6 at 10 a.m. They checked me again. They gave me ice chips and popsicles because I hadn't eaten anything since the day before because this was the following day. So I hadn't eaten anything, and you can't eat anything when you're in labor. So they gave me ice chips and popsicles. And I remember that orange popsicle being like the best thing I had ever eaten. It was so good. It's just pretty much a waiting game. You're just sitting there waiting for you to dilate enough to start pushing. And then they checked me again at, I want to say, this is when I started dilating quickly. Then they checked me again 2 hours later at noon, and I was at an 8. And then once I was at 8 centimeters, my doctor went ahead and broke my water. And then at 2 o'clock, they checked me, and I was 10 centimeters dilated. But I didn't have that urge to push, so my nurse started doing some practice pushes with me. This was the hardest part of labor. We started the practice pushes at 2 o'clock. I didn't realize how tired, when I was pregnant, I didn't realize how tiring pushing would be, but it was so exhausting. I was crying. I was telling my nurse, I can't do it. I'm exhausted. I can't do it. And she was just like, nope, your body's made for this. You can do it. My husband was holding one leg and the nurse was holding the other. And I just kept crying that I could not do it. So then I kept pushing. I want to say I pushed for an hour. Yeah. So we pushed for an hour, then it was 3 o'clock. My doctor came back in and she said, you know what, why don't we give you more epidural medication and we'll let you rest and then we'll come back to pushing in a little bit. So I said, great, awesome. So they gave me more epidural medication, and at that point I was so numb and I was so exhausted, I fell asleep for an hour. And then at about 4 o'clock, my doctor came back in and said, no, we need to push now. You know, you had your break, we need to push now. So then started pushing again, and this time it was so much easier. I remember laughing with the nurse and being like, see, this is how I want to push, because I had more epidural medication. I couldn't feel a thing. I was a little bit loopy, and I told my mom that I was, and she's like, really? The epidural made you loopy? And I was like, yeah. So I was a little loopy, but it felt much better pushing this time. And then they realized that so when a baby comes out, their face is supposed to be down and they're supposed to come out like that. My son's face was up so that he was what they call sunny side up. which means he was getting stuck in my pelvis every time I was pushing. So he really wasn't going anywhere. So then the doctor realized this, and she said that we're going to do what's called the vacuum. While you push, I have these tools, and I start pulling the baby out. And at this point, a ton of people started coming in the room. There was a huge table with all these tools. There was a ton of people. It was crazy. It got crazy in there. But she said, you're going to push and I'm going to pull with the vacuum. Okay. So then we started doing that for a little bit. And then I started getting tired again. And I was telling her, I'm exhausted. I can't do this anymore. At this point, honestly, in my head, I was like, just give me a damn C-section. That's all I want. I just want to be cut open. I just want the baby out, and I want this to be over with. Then she looked at the heart rate monitor and told me that his heart rate was dropping and that he needed to come out in the next couple pushes, or she was sending me for a C-section. And then I was like, oh God, all right, I need to do this. I just wanted the baby out really quick. So I pushed really hard, and then at 4:53 p.m. he was born. He came out perfect. The first thing I said when he was born was, oh my God, you're so tiny. He was 7 pounds, 4.2 ounces. I didn't tear at all, which was amazing. When she said that, actually, when she was stitching me up, and she goes, oh, you didn't tear. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't tear. I was so excited. That was definitely a highlight of my labor. So the recovery from my labor was super easy because of the fact that I didn't tear. But then we did some skin to skin, and we were in the labor and delivery room. They keep you for 2 hours, and then they send you up to the baby and mother unit. But I was starving, so my husband ordered me a pizza real quick as soon as I delivered him, and we ate pizza, and we just bonded with our baby before they sent us upstairs to the mother and baby unit. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Unfortunately, I wasn't doing YouTube at the time that I delivered my son. Otherwise, I would have definitely done a labor and delivery vlog. So I figured I would do a labor and delivery story for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you in my next video.